The table looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Perfect lighting, white dishes, wine breathing just long enough to impress. My sister, Melissa, was born for scenes like that. She didn't just host dinners, she orchestrated them like a campaign, complete with subtle jabs disguised as compliments. "Still stationed at the base, huh?" she asked, swirling her glass. "Logistics right? That's cute. You must love telling people you're technically in the Navy. Heaven." Her tone was sugar-coated poison. My mother shifted in her chair. Ryan, Melissa's husband, the Navy SEAL, she never stopped bragging about, just looked down at his plate. He knew better than to get involved. I cut into my chicken and smiled. "Someone's got to keep your husband's ammo arriving on time." Melissa laughed. "Oh, come on. You push papers, Elena. Generals respect warriors, not spreadsheets." ID. She said it with that perfect little smirk, the same one she used when we were kids, and she caught me doing her homework while she went out. She'd always found ways to make effort look small. "I guess we all serve in different ways," I said. It wasn't defensive, it was factual, but she couldn't let it go. Sure. I mean, you're basically a glorified FedEx with medals." Ryan's fork froze midair. My mother tried to change the subject. "So, Melissa, how's work at the PR office?" "Oh, she said, pretending to be humble. "We're prepping a campaign for the Navy's public image, showing real leadership, real courage." She turned back to me. The kind of thing the admirals actually notice." Her words hit harder than she probably realized, but I didn't flinch. I'd learned that silence unnerves people more than anger ever could. She wanted a reaction. I wasn't giving her one. Ryan finally spoke. "Melissa." Just her name. Quiet, but enough to make her blink. She waved him off. "What?" "I'm just saying. Some people talk about service. Others live it." That was her way of reminding everyone at the table that she was married to a man who jumped out of planes and kicked down doors. I was the sister who managed supply chains and fuel budgets. Except what she didn't know, what she never bothered to ask, was that without people like me, soldiers like her husband wouldn't make it home. "Ryan," I said evenly, "how often does your team get shipments from NAVSUP?" He looked up uneasy. "Every week." "Then you might owe a thank you to some of those paper pushers." The silence after that was heavy. Melissa rolled her eyes. "Whatever helps you sleep, Captain." "Captain!" The way she said it, like it was a participation trophy. I set my fork down. "You ever notice," I said, "how the people shouting the loudest about bravery are usually the ones standing farthest from the blast?" Her smile froze. It was my mother's turn to cough, just to break the tension. "Anyone for dessert?" Melissa stood up, her heels clicking against the tile. "I'm fine. Ryan and I have an early flight tomorrow. He's meeting the Admiral's team in D.C. "Another photo op?" I asked before I could stop myself. She gave me a look. "You wouldn't understand. It's about recognition." "I understand recognition," I said. "I just don't need an audience for it." She tilted her head, that same condescending smile back in place. "That's why you'll never be respected by generals, Elena. You hide behind your desk while the rest of us lead." I didn't answer. I just picked up my glass, took a slow sip, and looked right at her. The kind of look that says, "You've already lost this argument. You just don't know it yet." Ryan stood awkwardly, pushing his chair back. "I'll get the car." She grabbed her purse. "Good luck with your spreadsheets, Captain." "Good luck keeping your husband's ammo stocked," I said without looking up. She froze for half a second. Then she left, her perfume trailing behind like smoke after a match. The door closed, and the house finally exhaled. My mother sighed. "You didn't have to bite back." "I didn't," I said, finishing my wine. That was restraint. Outside, I heard their car start, tires crunching down the gravel driveway. My mother leaned over, her voice low. "You know she only says those things because she's jealous." "Jealous?" I asked. "Of what?" "Of you," she said. "You earned what she tries to marry into." I smiled, tired, not smug. "She can keep her photo ops. I'll keep my rank." I started clearing the plates, letting the clink of dishes drown out the echo of my sister's laughter. There's something about being mocked by family that hits different. Outsiders can insult you, and it slides off. But when it's your own blood, it sticks, sharp and quiet. That night, as I folded my uniform for the next morning, I caught myself thinking of her words. Generals don't respect paperwork. Maybe not. But respect isn't given, it's earned. And she had no idea how close I already was to proving it. If you've ever had a family member underestimate you, drop a comment below. I read every one. And if you like powerful family revenge stories and military tales about respect and quiet strength, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. The smell of diesel fuel always takes me back to the desert. Hot wind, static in the radio, the constant grind of sand against metal. Those are the sounds of every bad decision that somehow turns out right. I was stationed in Iraq in 2017, in a base that looked more like a dust bowl than a military post. I was the officer in charge of logistics for Operation Iron Dune. My job was simple on paper. Keep supplies moving, don't get anyone killed doing it. Reality was less simple. That night, comms went dead for a SEAL team stuck near the border. They'd been on a raid, and the dust storm had taken down the airlift. Our manifest showed a fuel convoy scheduled to leave at 0400, but the drivers were civilians under contract. They weren't trained for blackout conditions. The rules said, wait until sunrise. The voice in my head said waiting would get people killed. I remember standing under that orange sky, holding a radio that only spat static, and thinking, this isn't supposed to be my problem. But that's the thing about leadership. Sometimes it finds you when no one's watching. Chief Petty Officer Dunn came in, sand sticking to his beard. Ma'am, the SEALs haven't checked in for 6 hours. Weather's getting worse. Which team? I asked. Team 7, he said. Hunter's unit. Ryan Hunter. I'd seen his name 100 times on requisition forms. Never thought much of it. Just another signature in the machine that kept men alive. Is the convoy ready? Yes, ma'am. But the captain said to hold until 0500. I looked at the map. The storm pattern was shifting fast. By 0500, the route would be buried. We move now, I said. He hesitated. That's against protocol. So is letting a team die because you were afraid to break a rule. Haven't four. I grabbed my jacket, helmet, and clipboard. Yes, even in the middle of a sandstorm, someone still had to sign the fuel logs. The convoy rolled out 20 minutes later, headlights covered, tires sinking into mud made from sand and fuel spills. Visibility was a joke. The GPS flickered between coordinates like it couldn't decide where the Earth was. Halfway through the route, we hit the storm head-on. The wind screamed so loud it drowned the engines. One of the trucks veered off, and I jumped down to guide them by flashlight. The sand hit like needles. Ma'am, you shouldn't be out here, Dunn yelled over the roar. Neither should they, I shouted back. We pushed through for 4 hours until we reached the drop zone. The SEAL team was there barely. They looked like ghosts, covered in dust and exhaustion. Their vehicles were empty, comms dead, rations gone. One of them stumbled forward, helmet dented, and grabbed my arm. You're from NAVSUP? Yeah, I said. He laughed a dry, broken sound. Didn't think supply officers showed up in person? Don't get used to it, I said. They loaded the fuel, water, and medical crates like it was Christmas morning. A medic hugged me. Another guy tried to salute, but was shaking too hard. Then one of them looked up and said, "Who authorized this run?" I paused for a second. "Does it matter?" He grinned, teeth white against a face of mud. "It does if I live to tell it. I won." We got them back to base just before sunrise. The commanding officer was furious. "You defied a direct hold order," he barked. "Yes, sir," I said. "You could be written up?" "Understood." He stared at me for a long time. Then he said quietly, "They all made it back." "Yes, sir." He signed the report without another word. The incident was buried under emergency authorization. No medals, no commendations, just another classified line item. But I didn't care. Watching those men walk off the trucks alive was enough. A week later, I got an anonymous note in my inbox. No name, no signature, just 3 words. "You saved us." I deleted it. That's what we do in logistics. Keep things moving, don't make them about you. Years passed. I rotated out, took a desk post stateside, handled budgets and fleet readiness. Sometimes I'd see names from that mission pop up in reports. Hunter's was one of them. He got promoted. I got forgotten. It felt right at the time. Until the Navy sent me that invitation. I still remember holding the thick white envelope with the gold seal embossed at the top. Vice Admiral George R. Lowell requests the honor of your presence at the annual Officers' Recognition Dinner. Recognition. The word almost made me laugh. We all know those events aren't about recognition, they're about politics. Then I saw the list of honorees. SEAL Team 7. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Hunter. My coffee went cold in my hand. It's funny how the past doesn't knock before walking back in. I could still hear the wind, taste the dust, feel that moment in the desert when the headlights finally broke through the sand and someone yelled, "They're here!" I looked at the invitation again and thought, she'll be there too. Melissa, dressed in perfection, smiling like she invented success. Probably still telling people her husband leads real soldiers. Maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't the kind of soldier generals salute. But I was the kind who got them home. And for the first time since that storm, I felt something new stir under the calm. Not anger, not pride. Just the quiet certainty that sometimes respect doesn't come from who shouts the loudest. It comes from the one who shows up when no one else will. The envelope sat on my desk for 2 days before I opened it. I told myself it was just another formal event dress blues, polite smiles, forgettable speeches. But that gold seal from the Vice Admiral had weight. The kind of weight that meant the room would be full of people who measured worth in medals and last names. When I finally tore it open, the paper was thick enough to feel expensive. The typeface screamed importance. I traced the words with my thumb. Annual Navy Officers Recognition Dinner. Attendance requested. Captain Elena Ward. I leaned back, staring at the wall for a long minute. I'd been in the Navy 15 years. I'd organized operations that fed entire bases, moved fuel across continents, saved men who'd never know my name, and this was the first time anyone had ever used the word recognition near mine. I almost laughed. Recognition? For what? For staying quiet while everyone else took the credit? For keeping the wheels turning while others got the applause? Still, something in me, the part that remembered every smirk from my sister, every "logistics isn't leadership," said, "Go." The next morning, I called my mother. "You'll never guess who invited me to dinner with the generals." She gasped. "Elena, that's wonderful. Oh, Melissa will be thrilled." I didn't answer right away. "Right," she said softly. "She'll find out anyway." She was right. Melissa found out fast. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. "Melissa. Wow, you're coming to the big table now? Should I tell them to set up a desk in the corner for your spreadsheets?" Me. "I'll bring my own pen." No emoji. Just that. The silence that followed was almost satisfying. I checked the guest list again that night. SEAL Team 7 was being honored. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Hunter was listed under Special Operations Distinguished Service. I stared at his name longer than I wanted to admit. The man whose life I'd once indirectly saved. The husband of the sister who mocked me for even serving. The irony was almost poetic. Almost. When I told my mother about him being on the list, she asked, "Does Melissa know?" "Not yet. Maybe that's for the best." I thought about skipping the dinner altogether. But then I remembered that night at the family table, her voice dripping with pity as she said, "Generals respect warriors, not paperwork." I decided I'd let the generals decide for themselves. The week before the dinner, I got a call from Admiral Lowell's assistant. "Captain Ward, the Admiral would like you seated with the Operations Division near the front. He's particularly interested in your supply coordination during Iron Dune." That made me sit straighter. Iron Dune, the one mission no one ever mentioned. "Copy that," I said. When I hung up, I realized my hands were shaking. Not from nerves, something closer to disbelief. After all these years, someone had noticed. That night, I took my uniform out of the closet. The whites looked brighter than I remembered. I ran my hand along the medals. There weren't many. But every one of them had been earned in silence, without ceremony. I checked the seams, polished the brass buttons until they caught the light. Then I ironed the crease down the trousers so sharp it could cut glass. When I finished, I just stood there for a moment, watching my reflection. Same face, Same eyes, same quiet. But something in that mirror looked different now. Calmer, stronger, unbothered. I'd spent years downplaying what I did, acting like logistics was just background noise. But now, with the invitation pinned to my corkboard, I could feel that old restraint fading. Melissa called again 2 nights later. This time, she didn't sound mocking. She sounded nervous. Just making sure you're really coming. I am. Well, she said, trying to sound casual. It's kind of a formal crowd. People there might not understand what you do. Oh, I'm sure they will, I said. They're the ones still alive because of it. She didn't reply. I could almost hear her blinking through the phone. Ryan got on the line next, his voice low. Elena, it'll be good to see you there. Yeah, I said. Been a while since the desert. He hesitated, then said, Guess we all have stories we don't tell. I didn't answer, but I knew he wasn't talking about Iraq. When the day finally came, the morning started quiet. I brewed coffee, checked my watch, and felt the nerves twist in my stomach. Not fear, just anticipation. I wasn't walking into that ballroom to prove anything. I was walking in to exist exactly as I was, with nothing to hide. By noon, I was in D.C., uniform pressed flat in a garment bag, shoes shining like mirrors. The hotel smelled like expensive perfume and polished marble. Everywhere I looked, there were uniforms, handshakes, laughter, and those fake smiles people practice in the mirror before they leave their rooms. A staffer handed me a name badge. Captain Ward, Navy Logistics. Table 5. I glanced around. Melissa was across the lobby, in a silver dress that probably cost more than my uniform. She looked perfect, polished, proud. When her eyes met mine, her smile didn't reach her eyes. She walked over, glass of champagne in hand. You look professional. Thanks, I said. You look expensive. She laughed, a little too loud. Try not to talk about fuel trucks and inventory reports tonight, okay? Just smile when they mention the real heroes. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. The real heroes don't need anyone to speak for them. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She just blinked, then took a sip to cover it. See you inside, I said, walking past her. The ballroom doors opened, and the sound of conversation filled the air. Rows of uniforms, medals glinting under chandeliers, laughter echoing off crystal glasses. Somewhere in that crowd was Ryan Hunter. Somewhere in that crowd, respect was about to change hands, and not in the way my sister expected. The hum of the iron filled the apartment, steady and rhythmic. I pressed the last crease into my uniform trousers until the line looked sharp enough to slice through every doubt I'd ever swallowed. The white fabric gleamed under the lamp, bright and unflinching. That was the thing about navy whites, there's nowhere to hide. Every wrinkle shows. I set the iron aside and took a slow breath. The air smelled faintly of starch and coffee, and somewhere underneath that, the faint trace of nerves. I'd done harder things, airlifts in blackout zones, fuel shortages in war zones, but somehow, walking into a ballroom full of polished smiles and unspoken hierarchies felt worse. I poured myself a cup of coffee, turned on the news, and immediately regretted it. Another segment about defense spending, some talking head saying logistics was support work, not combat. I turned the TV off. It wasn't worth shouting at people who'd never seen a convoy get shelled because someone forgot to update a fuel manifest. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Mom. Remember, silence has its own power. Don't let her voice be louder than your dignity. She always had a way of sounding like a sermon wrapped in motherly guilt. Still, she wasn't wrong. I buttoned the jacket and stood in front of the mirror. The gold bars on my shoulders caught the light, and for a second, I almost didn't recognize myself. There she was, Captain Elena Ward, U.S. Navy. The woman my sister laughed at, dismissed, reduced to paperwork in a uniform. But the truth was, I didn't need Melissa to respect me. I just wanted her to stop pretending she was the only one who understood what honor looked like. I adjusted my collar again, then pinned my nameplate in place. Each click of the metal sounded final. The knock on the door startled me. When I opened it, Lieutenant Grace Maddox stood there, my colleague and closest thing to a friend at base. She whistled softly. Damn, Captain, You look like you're about to take command of the Pentagon. I smiled. Just dinner. She leaned against the doorframe. You're not fooling anyone. This isn't dinner, it's a political minefield. You ready? As I'll ever be? She handed me a small velvet box. From the supply division. They said you never got the commendation medal for Iron Dune. Thought you should have it. I opened it slowly. The silver medal gleamed, unissued but earned. My throat tightened. They can't give you the credit officially, Grace said. But everyone in logistics knows who saved that SEAL unit. I closed the box carefully. Thanks. I'll keep it off the record. Grace tilted her head. You're really not going to tell anyone, are you? I shrugged. Not my style. She smirked. Well, if anyone deserves to walk in there with their head up, it's you. After she left, I stood there holding the box for a moment before setting it on the table. Recognition wasn't the goal, it never had been. But it was nice to know the truth wasn't lost on everyone. By early evening, I was ready. Uniform pressed, hair pinned back, shoes polished so clean I could see the city skyline in them. When I stepped outside, the air had that cool Virginia bite, the kind that wakes you up more than caffeine ever could. Driving toward DC, I kept my eyes on the horizon, not the traffic. Every few miles, I caught myself rehearsing polite small talk I'd never actually use. Yes, sir. Of course, Admiral. No, I didn't serve overseas this year. Lies of omission, polite ones. Halfway there, I stopped at a light and caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My expression was calm. Not fake calm, but earned calm, the kind that comes from surviving things most people don't even know exist. When I parked at the hotel, I sat in the car for a moment, watching other officers walk in white uniforms, black suits, high heels that clicked like punctuation marks. Everyone looked like they belonged. I wasn't sure I did. Then I remembered something my CO once told me. Belonging isn't about being invited. It's about showing up anyway. So I stepped out. The lobby was a blur of medals and chatter. I spotted a few familiar faces officers who used to email me with subject lines like, urgent, need this yesterday. They smiled now, polite, probably not realizing who'd saved their missions from collapsing. At the far end of the room, near the entrance to the ballroom, I saw Melissa. She was standing with Ryan, her hand resting on his arm like she was presenting him to the world. The two of them looked like a recruiting poster, perfect posture, perfect lighting. She noticed me first. Her smile was practiced. You made it, she said, like she'd been doubting I would. Wouldn't miss it, I replied. She looked me up and down, scanning my uniform the way a critic examines a painting. You clean up well. Yeah, I said. So do spreadsheets. Her jaw tightened for half a second before she recovered with a laugh that sounded rehearsed. Try not to mention work tonight, okay? This is about celebration. Sure, I said. Some of us have plenty to celebrate. Ryan stepped forward, his eyes on me, not the way men look at women, but the way soldiers look at someone they recognize but can't quite place. There was a flicker there, something unspoken. Good to see you again, Captain Ward, he said formally. You too, Commander. Melissa glanced between us, confused. Wait, you two know each other? Small Navy, I said. Everyone's crossed paths somewhere. Her smile froze, but she didn't push it. Someone called her name from across the room, and she excused herself with a pat on Ryan's arm. He stayed where he was, still watching me. Iron Dune, he said quietly. I met his eyes. You remember that? Hard to forget the night we almost died. I nodded once. Glad you didn't. He smiled faintly. So am I. RL. Before I could say anything else, an announcement echoed through the hall. Officers, please take your seats. Melissa turned, waving Ryan over. He hesitated just a second before joining her. As I walked into the ballroom, I adjusted my gloves and straightened my posture. The chandeliers shimmered above, reflecting 1,000 tiny points of light across the room. And somewhere deep down, beneath the calm and the starch and the silence, I could feel it. The quiet hum before something shifts, like the still air right before the storm rolls in. The sound hit first, the low murmur of 100 conversations bouncing off marble walls. Then came the orchestra, soft enough to sound expensive. Crystal glasses clinked, metals caught the light, and every smile in the room looked just a little too polished. I walked in like I'd done this 1,000 times before, shoulders straight, chin level. The name card on my table read, Captain Elena Ward, Logistics Command. The table was near the front, close enough to the Vice Admiral's podium that I could see my reflection in the silver base of the microphone. Melissa was already seated across the room, next to Ryan. Her laughter carried just enough to be noticed. She looked radiant, hair done in that effortless way that probably took 3 hours, her silver dress catching every drop of light. The kind of woman who looked like she'd never known dust or deployment. Ryan, on the other hand, sat quiet. He scanned the room the way trained men do, calculating exits, distances, eyes on details no one else noticed. When his gaze landed on me, he froze. It wasn't shock exactly. It was recognition trying to claw its way to the surface. I raised my glass slightly, an unspoken acknowledgement. His eyes narrowed, and I knew the memory was connecting. A voice behind me broke the moment. "Captain Ward," a man said, extending a hand. "Admiral James Preston. I've heard your name come up in a few commendations." I smiled politely. "All good things, I hope." He chuckled. "Depends who you ask. Supply officers tend to make or break missions. Usually both." "I try to keep it in the make column," I said. He laughed, motioning toward the crowd. "Enjoy the evening. The Navy needs more quiet professionals. The loud ones get all the headlines, but it's the quiet ones who save the headlines from being disasters." That line stuck with me. Quiet professionals. It fit like a second skin. The lights dimmed slightly as dinner was served. I could hear Melissa's voice drifting through the noise. "You know, Ryan's team is being honored tonight for operational excellence. The SEALs set the standard. Logistics is important, of course, but..." I didn't have to hear the rest. I'd already lived that sentence my entire life. The Vice Admiral took the stage, tapping the mic. "Tonight, we celebrate the men and women who embody service before self." His voice filled the room, deep and commanding. "Each one of you has done something remarkable. Some in the light, others in silence. Both matter." The irony almost made me laugh. Halfway through the speech, Ryan turned slightly in his chair, just enough to glance my way. There it was again, that flicker of recognition, sharper now, like the memory had finally cleared the fog. He leaned toward Melissa, whispered something. She glanced over her shoulder, spotted me, and her posture stiffened. When the applause began, the first honorees were called aviators, commanders, strategists, polished names for polished people. Then came Lieutenant Commander Ryan Hunter, SEAL Team 7. Melissa's smile widened like she'd won something. Ryan stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the stage. He carried himself like a man who'd seen the worst of the world and made peace with it. The Admiral shook his hand. "For courage and leadership under hostile conditions during Operation Iron Dune." The words hung in the air like a secret suddenly made public. I felt every heartbeat echo through the floor. Iron Dune. Melissa clapped with her perfect manicure. I stayed still. Ryan's jaw tightened for a split second before he nodded at the Admiral. "It was a team effort, sir." When he sat back down, he didn't look at her. He looked at me. Just a glance, but enough. Melissa noticed. "What?" she whispered. "Nothing," he said. She looked unconvinced. Her voice dropped, but I still heard it. "You keep staring at her. Do you know her from somewhere?" He hesitated. "Yeah," he said softly. "From the night we almost didn't come back." Melissa frowned. "What are you talking about?" Before he could answer, another officer joined our table, Commander Patel, someone I'd worked with before. "Captain Ward, didn't you coordinate the resupply convoys during Iron Dune?" I nodded, keeping my tone neutral. "Among other things." Melissa froze, her smile faltering. "Wait, that Iron Dune? The one my husband—" "Yes," Patel said. "Her operation saved a lot of lives that week." Ryan exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "More than you know." Melissa blinked, like someone had just turned the lights up too bright. Across the table, Admiral Preston smiled at me. "Quiet professionals," he said again. I raised my glass slightly in acknowledgement. Dinner continued, but the air at Melissa's table had changed. Her charm had cracks now. Ryan sat silent, and she kept glancing at me, her expression tight, like she was recalculating every insult she'd ever thrown. When dessert came, a small moment of calm returned. A violinist played near the stage. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway for some air. The corridor was quiet, lined with portraits of admirals and command ships. I was halfway down when I heard footsteps. Ryan. He stopped beside me. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You were the one who sent that convoy." I didn't look at him. I was just doing my job. He nodded slowly. "You didn't have to risk it." Neither did you," I said. "But you did." He looked like he wanted to say more, but the words stayed caught somewhere between pride and guilt. "I tried to find out who authorized it," he said. "They said it was classified." "It still is," I said quietly. "Let's keep it that way." His jaw flexed. "You saved 6 men that night, Captain. You saved me." I turned to face him then, meeting his eyes. "You don't owe me anything, Commander. Just remember who fills your tank." "Okay." He smiled, small, real, the kind that doesn't need ceremony. "Understood, ma'am." The door to the ballroom opened, and Melissa's voice called out, sharp and searching. "Ryan?" He straightened. "Better get back." I nodded once. Wouldn't want to keep her waiting. He lingered a moment, then walked away. The music swelled again, muffled by the door closing behind him. I stood there for a while, the quiet settling back over me like a familiar blanket. Inside that ballroom, 2 worlds had just collided, one built on noise, the other on silence. And I was perfectly fine letting the silence win. Ryan didn't look at Melissa when he returned to the table. He sat down slowly, the way someone does when their mind is somewhere else entirely. She leaned toward him, whispering something sharp, but he barely blinked. Across the room, I could feel his gaze find me again. It wasn't the awkward kind of eye contact. This one carried weight, memory, the kind that pulls the air out of a room. The Admiral started another round of introductions, but I wasn't listening anymore. My thoughts drifted to the desert. I could almost hear the static in the comms again, the sound of sand hitting metal, the convoy lights cutting through a wall of dust. Back then, I didn't know who was on the other end of that rescue. I just knew someone needed help. That was enough. But standing here now, surrounded by chandeliers and champagne, it was strange, realizing one of those voices had a face, and that face was staring at me. The ceremony went on. Every time someone's name was read, there was applause. Every time Melissa laughed, it sounded like she was trying to drown out the silence between her and her husband. At one point, Ryan leaned closer to her. I couldn't hear him, but his lips moved slowly, deliberately. She looked confused, then pale. Her hand tightened around her glass until her knuckles showed white. When the applause for another officer filled the room, Ryan stood. Not dramatically, not to make a scene, just quietly enough that people turned to notice. He made his way across the ballroom, passing rows of uniforms, until he stopped beside my table. "Captain Ward," he said. His voice was low, steady. "Commander Hunter?" I replied, looking up at him. He nodded once, respectful. Then, to everyone's surprise, he said, "You were Iron Dune, weren't you?" A few heads turned. My fork froze halfway to the plate. "That's classified," I said, matching his tone. He smiled faintly. "Not anymore." Melissa's laughter cut through the air, brittle and too loud. "Ryan, really? We're at dinner." He ignored her. His eyes stayed on me. My team was dying out there. We were told no one could reach us. Then, out of nowhere, that convoy came through the sand. The lead truck had NAVSUP markings. You were behind it, weren't you? I held his gaze. "Someone had to keep your coffee warm." He let out a quiet laugh, the kind that wasn't meant for humor but relief. "You saved 6 men that night. I've been trying to find out who authorized the run ever since." "Some things don't need names," I said. He shook his head. "Some do." The room had gone still. The Admiral at the podium paused mid-sentence. People were watching now. Officers, guests, even a few generals pretending not to stare. Melissa stood abruptly. "Ryan, sit down. You're embarrassing yourself." He turned toward her, calm. "I'm not embarrassed." She forced a smile, trying to laugh it off. "Sweetheart, this is not the time to talk about some paperwork from years ago. She's logistics. She wasn't in the field." The silence after that was brutal. Every pair of eyes in the room shifted between her and me. Ryan took a slow breath, then said, "With respect, Melissa, you weren't there." I hadn't planned to say anything, but something about the moment demanded honesty. I stood. "It's fine," I said evenly. "She's right. I wasn't in the field. I was the one keeping it alive from behind it." The Admiral cleared his throat at the podium, perhaps hoping to smooth things over. "Captain Ward coordinated the Iron Dune convoys," he said. "That operation was later marked as critical to mission success. I'm glad to see the connection made." The whispering started instantly. Not gossip recognition. It's a strange sound, hearing respect move through a crowd that once didn't see you. Melissa tried to recover, brushing imaginary lint off her dress. "Well, that's wonderful," she said lightly. "Everyone plays their part, right?" Ryan didn't sit. He was still looking at me, eyes locked with the kind of gratitude that words can't cover. I nodded once, small but real. "Glad you made it home, Commander." His mouth twitched into something close to a smile. "So am I, ma'am." That one word, ma'am, carried more than any toast or plaque ever could. The Admiral motioned for everyone to return their attention to the front, but the atmosphere had shifted. My sister, who lived for social control, couldn't find her footing. Her laughter didn't sound like music anymore. It sounded like glass cracking under pressure. As the night went on, the conversations around me turned polite again, but softer now. People I'd never met leaned over to shake my hand. "You ran Iron Dune? That was you? Damn fine work, Captain." I smiled and nodded, keeping my tone measured. "Just doing the job." Across the room, Melissa sat rigid, her smile brittle, eyes darting anywhere but me. Ryan, on the other hand, looked lighter, as if something he'd carried for years had finally lifted. When the band started playing again, I excused myself and stepped toward the corridor near the side doors. The hallway smelled faintly of old wood polish, and the sea breeze sneaking in through an open vent. Ryan caught up a minute later. "You knew I'd be here tonight, didn't you?" "I knew my sister would be," I said. He laughed under his breath. "She told everyone logistics wasn't real leadership." "She's consistent," I said. He ran a hand through his hair, then said, "You know, in my world, we salute people for what they do under fire. I never got the chance to do that for you." Before I could answer, someone called from across the room, "Commander Hunter, you're needed for photos." He straightened. "Duty calls," he said, but not before adding, "For what it's worth, Captain, you earned more than recognition that night." I nodded. "So did you." He walked away, back into the noise and the light. I stood there, still, letting the sound of clinking glasses fade into the distance. For the first time that evening, I felt no anger, no tension, no need to defend anything. It was strange how peace could show up right in the middle of chaos, quiet, steady, and perfectly timed. The applause had faded, but the tension hadn't. You could feel it hanging in the air, thick, invisible, stretching between tables like a tripwire. Ryan was back beside my sister, quiet, composed, pretending nothing had happened. Melissa, however, couldn't help herself. When she was embarrassed, she didn't shut up, she doubled down. The Vice Admiral called for another toast. Everyone stood, glasses raised, smiling like they hadn't just watched a marriage start cracking in real time. "To service and sacrifice," he said. "To service and sacrifice," the room echoed. Melissa leaned toward Ryan, her voice low but sharp. "You just had to make it about her, didn't you?" He didn't answer. She turned, scanning the tables until her gaze landed on me. Then she smiled tight, fake, dangerous. "Captain Ward," she called, her tone sweet enough to rot teeth. "Since you're finally getting some recognition, maybe you can tell everyone what it's like to be in logistics. You know, keeping the real soldiers organized." The room went quiet. Someone at the next table coughed just to fill the space. I set my glass down. Mostly, it's about making sure people come home alive. Her smile didn't move. "Of course. But it's not really the same as being out there, is it? Not like Ryan's team." I could see where she was going with this, trying to re-establish her little hierarchy, the one where she's the hero's wife and I'm the clerk. "No," I said evenly. "It's not the same. They risk their lives in the field. I risk mine when they forget to file their supply manifests. O's. The people around us laughed softly, too nervous to be genuine, but enough to sting. Melissa flushed, her eyes narrowing. Oh, come on, Elena. You can't compare paperwork to combat. I took a slow sip of my drink. You're right. Paperwork usually wins. That got a few louder laughs. Even the Admiral cracked a small smile. Melissa's hand tightened around her wine glass. Ryan muttered, Melissa, stop. But she was too far gone. No, I'm serious, she insisted. Generals respect leadership. They respect courage. They respect people who act, not organize. I looked her dead in the eye. Funny thing about courage, it's not always loud. Her laughter came out too high-pitched. Oh, please, you sit behind a desk. My husband leads men into battle. Ryan's voice was low now, controlled but dangerous. Melissa. She ignored him, tossing her hair back. You wouldn't understand. You don't know what it's like to earn respect in a room full of people who actually matter. That did it. The last layer of polite restraint I'd been wearing peeled off quietly, cleanly. I stood, not angrily, just deliberate enough to make the room notice. You're right, I said. I don't know what that's like. I've only been in rooms full of people whose lives depended on the work no one clapped for. The Admiral's gaze flicked to me, interested. Ryan looked like he wanted to disappear. I kept my voice calm. Respect doesn't come from being the loudest one in the room, or the one who gets their picture taken. It comes from showing up when no one's watching, when no one's going to hand you a medal for it. Someone at the back said quietly, Damn right. Melissa blinked, trying to smile again, but her face wouldn't cooperate. That's cute. You rehearsed that? No, I said. Some of us don't need scripts. The Admiral tapped his glass. Ladies, gentlemen, let's keep the tone respectful. We're all here to celebrate service in its many forms. Melissa turned to him, that desperate brightness in her voice returning. Of course, Admiral. I was just saying logistics isn't really leadership. It's more of a support role. That was it. The final, sharp jab. The kind meant to draw blood while still sounding polite. But before I could answer, Ryan pushed his chair back and stood. The scrape echoed through the room. Melissa, he said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. You have no idea what you're talking about. She froze. Excuse me? He faced her fully now, the calm gone from his voice. You weren't there. You don't know what she did. The Admiral raised a hand slightly, but no one dared interrupt. Ryan looked at me, then back at the crowd. Iron Dune would have been a graveyard if she hadn't broken the rules that night. She went against protocol to get us supplies through a storm that grounded every aircraft in the region. I'm alive because she made a call no one else had the guts to make. Every sound in the room stopped, forks, glasses, conversation, all frozen in the weight of his words. He nodded once, as if sealing it. That's leadership. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the Admiral set his glass down and began to clap. One by one, others joined in. Not the polite kind of applause reserved for speeches, but slow, deliberate, real. Melissa stood there, face pale, mouth open, caught between disbelief and humiliation. I didn't look at her. I just inclined my head toward Ryan. Thank you, Commander. He straightened his uniform. Just telling the truth, ma'am. The Admiral cleared his throat again, this time smiling. Captain Ward, I think we've all learned something about quiet courage tonight. Apolore. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, it was approving, genuine. I sat down, calm, composed, letting the noise wash over me. Across the table, Melissa finally sat, staring at her untouched wine glass, her reflection shaking slightly in the red liquid. Ryan didn't say another word. The music started again, the conversations resumed, but the room wasn't the same. Something had shifted. The balance of power the invisible kind families build over years of comparison and resentment had flipped without a single shout or threat. And as the orchestra played on, I realized something simple and sharp. Revenge doesn't always need fire. Sometimes, it only needs truth said out loud. Once, in the right room. The ballroom lights glared off every medal and wine glass, but the real spotlight was the silence. No one dared move after Ryan's words. It was like someone had cut the air in half and left everyone holding their breath. Melissa was still standing, clutching her clutch like a weapon. Her lips trembled with a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're exaggerating," she said weakly. "You make it sound like she—" Ryan's voice sliced clean through her. "She saved our lives, Melissa. You wouldn't know what that means." The words landed like a verdict. The Admiral didn't stop it this time. No one did. I could feel every eye in the room swing toward me, but I stayed still, calm, composed. You learn that kind of control after years of being underestimated. Ryan turned to face me, his posture straight, his tone shifting from personal to official. "Captain Ward," he said, loud enough for the whole ballroom to hear, "on behalf of SEAL Team 7, thank you." He didn't wait for permission. He stood at attention and saluted. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, like an instinctive echo, 3 officers nearby rose and joined him. One after another, more stood, some SEALs, some pilots, even 2 generals. The sound of chairs scraping against marble became its own kind of applause. The entire room, people who had ignored me, who had nodded politely at the logistics officer, was standing. Melissa's face drained of color. Her husband was saluting the very woman she'd mocked. And worse, everyone was following his lead. I didn't move for several seconds. My throat felt tight, not from emotion, but from sheer disbelief that silence could turn into something this powerful. Finally, I gave a small nod, enough to acknowledge but not steal the moment. "At ease, Commander," I said quietly. Ryan lowered his hand, jaw set. "Yes, ma'am." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was simple, quiet, real, and that's exactly what made it hit harder than any speech could have. The Admiral finally broke the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, smiling faintly, "that's what respect looks like." Laughter rippled through the room, relieved, nervous, genuine. Someone started clapping, then another. Soon, applause filled the hall again, this time not for rank, not for medals, but for a moment that didn't need a title. Ryan stepped back to Melissa's side, but she didn't look at him. Her smile was gone now, replaced by something hollow. She muttered something I couldn't catch, then grabbed her purse and left the table. He didn't follow. The dinner carried on like nothing had happened, but everyone knew it had. People approached me, shook my hand, asked about my work. The tone was different now, no longer polite curiosity, but genuine respect. One of the generals leaned over. "Captain, not every battle needs a battlefield." I smiled. "Some just need a spreadsheet." He laughed. "You'd be surprised how many wars are lost without one." When the crowd thinned, I stepped outside. The night air was cool, the sound of waves faint from the harbor below. I stood near the balcony railing, watching the reflection of the ballroom lights ripple across the water. A few minutes later, footsteps approached, steady, familiar. Ryan joined me, hands in his pockets, tie slightly loosened. "Never thought I'd see a logistics officer steal a Navy dinner," he said quietly. "Never thought a SEAL would do the speech for me," I replied. He gave a half smile. "Guess we're even." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sea breeze carried the faint echo of laughter from inside, mixing with the rhythm of the tide. Then he said, softer, "You know, after Iron Dune, Command said the convoy decision was reckless, that it could have cost lives. But we all knew it saved them. Seeing you here tonight, it makes sense now." I shrugged. "Sometimes the right call doesn't look like it on paper." He nodded. "Tell that to half the people I report to." There was a quiet understanding between us. No rank, no titles, just 2 people who'd both been through the same kind of storm. He exhaled, looking out at the water. "She doesn't get it," he said finally. "Melissa, she thinks service is about uniforms and photographs. But what you did, that's the kind of thing people like me don't forget." I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. After a while I said, "Go back inside, Commander. Let them have their stories. The truth doesn't need an audience." He smiled faintly, that calm, grateful kind of smile. "You always talk like that?" "Only when people finally listen." He chuckled. "Good night, Captain." "Good night, Commander." He turned and walked back toward the ballroom, leaving me alone with the sea and the sound of distant applause that hadn't quite faded yet. Behind the glass doors, I could see Melissa reappearing near the exit, her eyes scanning for him, her smile glued back into place. She looked smaller somehow, like someone who just realized her reflection doesn't control the mirror. I stayed where I was, the air cool against my face, my reflection rippling in the dark water. Respect, I realized, isn't given, it's revealed. Sometimes all it takes is a room full of noise, and one person brave enough to stay silent. The next morning, the Navy Times ran a headline that no one in my family expected to see. Commander honors unsung hero at officers' gala. There was a photo of Ryan saluting, my expression calm but unyielding, the caption reading simply, Captain Elena Ward Logistics Officer, Iron Dune Operation. It hit like a missile in my sister's world. By noon, her phone must have exploded with calls. She'd built her identity around being the star in the family, the perfect one, married to a war hero, admired at charity luncheons. But now, she wasn't the headline. That evening, my mother called. Her voice carried that polite restraint she used whenever pride and confusion collided. "Elena," she said carefully, "I saw the paper. It's impressive." "Thank you, Mom." Pause. Then the question came, gentle but sharp. "Did you have to let it happen that way?" I smiled faintly. "I didn't let anything happen, it just did." She sighed. "Melissa feels humiliated." "Melissa humiliated herself," I said simply. All I did was stand still. There was silence on the other end. Then a soft, resigned, "You always were too calm for your own good." "I learned it from the army," I said. "Panic wastes oxygen." When the call ended, I sat for a moment, staring at the quiet apartment. The air smelled faintly of coffee, and salt leftovers from last night's sea breeze still lingering in my clothes. It wasn't victory I felt. It was something steadier, like balance returning after years of tilt. By afternoon, Melissa's perfect circle of friends began posting photos from the gala, but this time I was in them. Not because they liked me, but because now I was that Captain Ward. The one the Navy wrote about. The one the commander saluted. Ryan sent an email short, formal, like a report. "Captain, the salute was long overdue. My team read the article this morning. They said to tell you they remember. RH." I didn't reply. Some things didn't need replies. Later that week, a delivery arrived at my office. A simple frame. Inside was a folded napkin from the gala, signed by several SEAL officers. In the center, someone had written, "For the woman who brought us home." I placed it on my shelf beside the mission coins. Not pride, just proof. That night, I received another message. This time, from Melissa. "We need to talk." No, hello. No, how are you? Just the command tone of someone trying to regain control. I met her at a cafe downtown Neutral Ground. She was already there, wearing sunglasses indoors, like guilt had turned into light sensitivity. "I can't believe you did that," she said before I'd even sat down. "I didn't do anything." "You let him salute you like that, in public." "Aleo." "I didn't ask him to." She leaned forward, whispering harshly, "Do you know how that made me look?" I looked at her calmly. "Yes." She blinked, as if she hadn't expected honesty to hit so directly. "You embarrassed me." "No," I said. "You embarrassed yourself. I just stopped protecting you from it." Her mouth opened, then closed. She wasn't used to not having the last word. "You've always thought you were better than me," she said, voice trembling now. "Even when you were just some nobody in a base uniform." "I never thought I was better," I said quietly. "I just stopped pretending I wasn't." For a moment, I thought she might cry. Instead, she laughed brittle, empty. "You think people respect you now? They'll forget. These moments fade." "Maybe," I said, "but they'll remember who didn't clap." Her smile fell away completely. "You sound just like Dad." "Funny," I said. "He always said you didn't listen to him either." End of fray. That ended the conversation. She left, heels clicking too loudly for someone walking away from her own reflection. When I returned home, my inbox had a new message from the Admiral's office. An internal commendation for exceptional initiative and leadership under combat conditions. It wasn't public, it didn't need to be. It meant they finally looked at the file that had gathered dust for years. I sat at my desk for a long time, reading it twice. My hand didn't shake. My chest didn't swell. It was quiet satisfaction, the kind that doesn't need to be shown to feel real. Outside, the evening fog rolled in over the harbor. Ships' lights blinked in the distance like steady beacons. Small, constant, sure. People talk about revenge like it's fire. They think it's about winning louder than the person who hurt you. But standing there, looking out at that calm sea, I knew better. Revenge isn't about noise. It's about stillness, the kind where the truth stands on its own, and everyone who doubted you is forced to face it without you saying a word. And that kind of silence? It echoes longer than applause ever could. The letter arrived 3 weeks later, tucked inside an envelope too formal to ignore. It was from Naval Command, not my unit, but the Office of Personnel Recognition. The kind of department that usually forgot names like mine. Inside was a single page. Captain Elena Ward, your record has been reviewed and amended to reflect meritorious conduct during Operation Iron Dune. Below it, a citation number, a signature from the Admiral, and an embossed seal. No fanfare, no ceremony, just acknowledgement, 12 years late. I placed it on the table beside my coffee mug, next to the folded napkin from the gala, the one signed by Ryan's team. The two pieces of paper couldn't have been more different. One bureaucratic, one human. But together, they told the truth better than words ever could. That afternoon, I found myself driving toward my parents' house. It wasn't planned, it was reflex. Some part of me wanted them to see it, to know I hadn't been exaggerating all those years when I said, logistics saved lives. The house looked the same as it always had: manicured lawn, white shutters, the flag still flying on the porch like patriotism could fix everything underneath. Melissa's car was already there. I walked inside, the floorboards creaking like they still remembered every argument we ever had. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring tea she wouldn't drink. She looked up, eyes soft but tired. You two shouldn't keep doing this, she said quietly. Doing what? I asked, trying to win. I didn't answer. Instead, I laid the letter on the counter. It's official now. She adjusted her glasses, reading it slowly. Her expression didn't change, but her hands trembled just enough to notice. You finally got what you deserved. I got what was mine, I said. Before she could reply, Melissa came in from the living room. Her voice carried that same brittle brightness she'd used at the gala. You couldn't resist showing it off, could you? It's a letter, I said. Not a parade. She laughed once, short and sharp. You think this makes you some kind of hero? I looked at her, calm. No, it just makes me honest. She crossed her arms, eyes glinting. You humiliated me in front of the entire Navy, and now you expect me to clap for you? I don't expect anything from you, I said. That's the difference between us. For a second, the only sound was the slow tick of the kitchen clock. Mom looked between us like she wanted to disappear. Then Melissa's voice cracked, low and raw. You always had to be the better one. The soldier, the quiet hero, the one people look at and say, why can't you be more like her? That's not my fault, I said quietly. It's not yours, she snapped. But you enjoyed it. I didn't deny it, because somewhere deep down, I knew she was right, not about the joy, but about the relief. The years of being dismissed, laughed at, diminished. It wasn't revenge that made me stand taller now. It was release. Mom finally spoke, voice trembling. Melissa, you owe your sister an apology. He sits. Melissa's head jerked up, stunned. Excuse me? For what you said? For how you treated her? She looked like she'd been slapped. You're taking her side? Mom sighed. There are no sides, Melissa. There's just what's right. But Melissa wasn't listening anymore. She turned to me, tears just barely held back. You think you've won, Elena? You think the salute, the letter, the headlines make you better than me? I took a slow breath. No, they just mean I stopped needing you to believe in me. Her face went still, blank, the kind of silence that comes when the argument's over but pride won't let you admit it. She picked up her purse, muttered something under her breath, and left. The door closed softly behind her. Mom sat down, rubbing her temples. You two have been fighting since you were kids. I stopped fighting years ago, I said. She's just been shadowboxing. Mom looked at the letter again, her voice quieter. You always remind me of your father, steady, unshakable, but sometimes I wonder if that calm costs you more than it gives. I thought about it. Maybe she was right. But calm isn't free. It's something you earn by losing everything noisy first. I folded the letter and slipped it back into my bag. Calm doesn't cost, I said finally. It protects. Before I left, Mom touched my arm gently. Elena, she said, she'll come around. I smiled faintly. Maybe, or maybe she won't. Either way, I'll still stand. Driving back through the fading light, I passed the naval base, where it had all started the same gates, the same flag. But it felt different now. Not bigger, just balanced. When I got home, I placed the letter on my shelf, between the commendations and the photo from Iron Dune. No frame, just paper. Because the truth didn't need decoration. It just needed time to be seen. Outside, the last bit of daylight faded over the harbor, the sky caught between gold and gray, the kind of color that never chooses sides, just exists quietly in between. That's where peace lives, I thought. Not in victory, not in apology, but in that steady middle ground where the noise finally stops mattering. The letter stayed on my shelf like a quiet monument. No frame, no signature display, just truth on paper. By then, the attention had died down. The Navy had moved on to its next headline, the gala was a memory, and Melissa had stopped calling. But some silences don't mean peace. They mean people are recalibrating how to treat you. 2 months later, I was invited to a symposium at the Naval War College. Topic: Modern Command and the Logistics Mindset. The irony didn't escape me. For a decade, logistics had meant invisible labor. Now, apparently, it meant leadership innovation. After the session, a young officer approached me, barely 30, nervous in her uniform. "Ma'am," she said, "I'm in supply. They say it's boring work, but hearing you speak it made me think maybe it matters more than people see." I smiled. "It does. They just don't clap for it until it saves their lives." She grinned, and for a second I saw myself 20 years ago, quiet, overlooked, but sure of something no one else understood yet. When I returned home that evening, an envelope was waiting on my doorstep, addressed in my sister's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet, no apology, no bitterness. Just a line of print clipped from a newspaper. Captain Elena Ward to lead joint initiative supporting women in service logistics. Underneath, she'd written, "You're doing what you were meant to do." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. And sometimes, that's enough. The initiative came fast. Within 6 months, the Navy approved a partnership with civilian contractors and veterans groups to train and support women in operational logistics roles. I named it the Meridian Program. It was part mentorship, part training, and all about making sure no one else had to fight for respect the way I did. Ryan was one of the first to volunteer as an advisor. "You're building an empire," he said when we met for the first planning session. "Just repairing the foundation," I said. He laughed. "You always were better at seeing the structure." The meetings became more frequent. Professional at first, then personal in the way shared purpose often becomes. We talked about command, failure, silence, and how wars don't always happen in deserts, they happen in families too. One afternoon, as we reviewed logistics routes for an upcoming joint exercise, he said something that stayed with me. "You know, when you walked into that ballroom, I thought I was seeing a ghost. The woman who saved my team, suddenly standing there like she'd never left the battlefield." I looked at him. "Maybe that's the problem. Some of us never do." He nodded. "And maybe that's what makes you dangerous in the right way." That night, I stayed late at the base office, reviewing applications for the first class of Meridian trainees. Over 200 women applied, from all branches, some active duty, some veterans, some just starting their service. Reading their letters felt like flipping through my own history, written in different hands. One wrote, "I'm tired of being called the coffee runner." Another, "They think I'm weak because I organize. They forget it's organization that wins wars." By midnight, I'd selected the first 12 names, 12 women who'd change how the Navy saw leadership. Not loud, not decorated, but precise, reliable, unshakable. A few weeks later, during the first training session, I stood in front of them in my uniform crisp whites, the same set I'd worn to the gala that night. Only this time, I wasn't walking into someone else's story. I was writing mine. Leadership, I began, isn't always about standing in front of people. Sometimes it's about being the reason they stand at all. They listened, not because I outranked them, but because I understood them. That's the difference. When the class ended, the youngest of them, a cadet barely 22, approached me with tears in her eyes. "Ma'am, do you ever get tired of proving them wrong?" I smiled. I used to. Now I just let them catch up. After everyone left, I walked to the pier behind the base. The sun was setting over the water, turning the ships gold and silent. A gentle wind carried the smell of salt and diesel, oddly comforting. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting anymore. Not for approval, not for rank, not even for revenge, just for direction. Behind me, the door opened. Ryan's voice carried over the sound of waves. "You're going to change more lives than you know." "Maybe," I said, "but only because someone once reminded me I could." He smiled, leaning on the railing beside me. "You mean the guy who broke protocol and saluted a captain in the middle of a ballroom? That would be the one." We stood there in silence, the water calm, the horizon wide. It wasn't romantic, it was something steadier. Mutual respect, shared battle scars, the kind of connection built on survival, not need. He turned to me finally. "So what's next for Captain Ward?" I looked out at the fading light. "Not captain. Director now, they just approved it this morning." He grinned. "Congratulations. You earned it." "No," I said, the corners of my mouth lifting. "I built it." The evening breeze caught my words and carried them toward the open sea. Somewhere beyond the water, ships were moving coordinated, balanced, exactly where they were supposed to be. And for once, so was I. The ceremony wasn't grand. It wasn't supposed to be. The Navy never did loud endings, it did quiet acknowledgments, the kind that mattered more. The morning sun hung over Norfolk Harbor, pale gold against the steel of anchored ships. The wind lifted the flags along the deck, their edges snapping like the rhythm of discipline itself. I stood at the edge of the pier in full uniform. White jacket, service cap, medals aligned with the precision of habit. The plaque at my side read, "Director Elena Ward, Meridian Initiative for Service Beyond Command." Behind me, a group of new recruits whispered softly, unsure if they should speak. They'd been part of the first graduating class of the program, 12 women who now carried the same weight I once had. But unlike me, they wouldn't have to hide their strength behind silence. The Admiral stepped forward, shaking my hand firmly. "Captain, no, Director Ward," he corrected with a smile. "You've changed how this institution measures leadership." "I didn't change it, sir," I said. "I just reminded it what it already was." He chuckled. "That's why we call it leadership." The applause was brief, polite, and real. Ryan stood a few rows back in his dress blues, hands clasped behind his back. Our eyes met for a second. He gave a small nod, not formal, not public, just quiet acknowledgement, the kind that said everything without saying anything. After the formalities ended, the crowd thinned, and the Admiral departed with his entourage. The recruits gathered around me for a group photo, all smiles, their uniforms crisp, their posture proud. When the camera clicked, one of them, Lieutenant Harris, asked, "Ma'am, what now? You've done everything." I smiled, adjusting my cap. "That's the good part about command, Lieutenant. You never really do everything. You just make sure others can." They laughed softly, but the meaning lingered. When they left, I stayed behind. The dock was quiet again, the sun higher now, turning the waves silver. I walked toward the edge, my reflection shifting between light and motion. It was strange how the water always looked the same, no matter how much had changed on land. I reached into my pocket and took out a folded letter, Melissa's last one. It had arrived a week earlier, postmarked from Seattle. "Elena," it read, "Mom told me you're speaking at the commissioning ceremony. I won't be there, but I wanted you to know I watched the interview. You looked like you belonged there. Maybe that's what I never understood. You never fought for attention, you fought for purpose, and you won." Below it, just 2 words, "I'm proud." I folded it carefully, pressing the crease back into place. For years, I'd imagined hearing those words. Now that they were here, They felt less like a victory and more like a quiet homecoming. Footsteps echoed behind me. Ryan again. "Didn't think you'd still be here," he said. "I don't leave things unfinished," I replied. He smiled. "Never did." We stood side by side, watching a destroyer glide out of port, the wake trailing long and clean behind it. The sound of engines hummed through the air, steady, determined. "You know," he said after a while, "the first time we met, I thought you were just another officer buried in paperwork. Then you broke protocol, saved 6 men, and rewrote what I thought leadership meant." "And the second time?" I asked. He chuckled. "You walked into that ballroom and didn't say a word. That was the loudest thing I ever heard." I looked at him, amused. "You still talk like a SEAL dramatic with punctuation." "I blee?" He laughed. "And you still deflect with humor." We let the conversation settle into silence again, the kind that felt earned, not empty. After a few minutes, he said, "You ever miss it? The missions, the adrenaline, the part where everything's on the line?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But command isn't about adrenaline. It's about knowing when to stop chasing storms." He nodded slowly. "That's why they follow you." "How?" The sea breeze shifted, carrying the faint sound of a bell from one of the nearby ships. It rang twice a change of watch. "I should go," I said finally. He turned to me. "Where to?" "Back to Meridian. The next class starts tomorrow." He smiled, that small, quiet one he never quite lost. "Of course it does." As he walked away, I looked out toward the horizon. The destroyer was just a dark line now, steady and sure. The sunlight bounced off the water, catching the edges of my uniform like it was all part of the same reflection. For the first time, I realized this was peace, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose. I took a breath, deep and slow, and said softly, "They mocked me once for not being a real soldier." The wind carried my voice out over the harbor. Now they understand what command looks like. The bell rang again. Ships shifted in the tide. Somewhere far down the pier, the recruits were laughing, already planning their next deployment. I turned toward the sound and began walking, the echo of my footsteps blending with the rhythm of the sea, steady, measured, certain. No medals, no applause. Just the calm authority of someone who'd finally built her place in the world and didn't need to defend it anymore. In the end, that's what all great revenge stories come down to, not destroying someone else, but rebuilding yourself so completely that they can't touch you anymore. If you enjoy stories like this, cheating stories, revenge stories, husband betrayal, or tales of quiet strength and justice, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, or share a moment when silence was your loudest answer. I read everyone.